here's the pieces for the pocket. This is your base piece. I've measured 5 inches from one notch to the other notch and drawn a line across, and you can see the little marks. On the back side, you have the interfacing covering where that line is for structure. Now that ready to use, I have a lining for the pocket, and that's the other piece of lining for the pocket. And I've drawn in a seam allowance. I have the flap. I've marked where the 5 inches from one side to the other that will match the exact same distance from here to here. So I've actually marked it and matched it from one to the other because sometimes you can get it slightly off. Now I'm going to take the flap and I'm going to sew it together. As you can see, I've creased and folded it, so there's a center line, but I'm going to fold it opposite and I will sew it. There's the marks I've put from 5 inches across, and I'm going to sew up one side and the other side. Now I have sewn, I'm going to trim off the corner and a little bit off this edge so it's not overhanging. There it is. Iron it. Here I have it ironed, the corners, and then I've marked my 3/8 seam allowance and a line. Take the pocket, match it up with the line drawn on the main fabric, and match the lines to the line, the 5 inches across and across this line. Then sew along the 3/8 seam mark. Now I have the flap attached and ready. I will now do the top. Take the pocket lining with the 3/8 seam allowance, place it on the top, matching up against the line. I've marked a line from one end to the other, which is straight up and down. Then you need to mark just like a 1/16 in from that, because when you want this pocket to fold over top, you don't want the lining to be seen. So it's going to be a slight diagonal. So just mark it inside, and you're going to start from this notch to that notch and sew across, and double check before you sew that from one line to the other line is 3/8 plus 3/8 again. You can see here it's 1 2 3/8 and 1 2 3/8, so it's perfect. You can even check along if you want. I'm sewing it on the line right now. Back and forth at the notch right before the 5-inch line. This is what it looks like so far. Your flap, your pocket lining, your sewn from your notches. This is the full 5 inches across. Now flipping to the back, you can see the 2 seam lines. These should measure the 3/4 of an inch across the whole thing. You can double check that if you think it might be off. And then you can see the slant. So I'm going to draw a line from the one end to the other end. There we go. And then I'm going to draw a line in the middle, which splits the 3/8 on both sides. Just like I'm going to mark 1 inch from the edge in on both sides. This is 1 inch from the longer side, not the shorter side. Then you draw a V matching the corners, and the same thing on the other side. Now you cut it open from the point to the other point, and then you cut along both V's out to the edges. I may fold it to snip the initial cut and then cut the rest. So, when cutting the V, you want to make sure that you don't catch the flap on the other side. So I tuck my scissors just in between the flap and the top layer. So I'm only cutting the one layer. When cutting to the corner, you may have to recut, but I always go slightly less and double check before. You don't want to go too far. This is an easy problem spot that you can ruin your project. You can see how I'm hugging to end right next to that stitching, as close as I can. And there's the flap, and it's going to sit on a diagonal. There it is cut. And now flip your project back over and tuck your seam through and your flap up, and tuck your flap down, and you'll tuck this inside through the hole. Here we have the pocket flipped up, the lining flipped under, and on the back side you can see the lining is ironed down, obviously, because that's going to be the inside pocket, and the flap seam is ironed flat, and these little triangles are now ironed open, and you can see how they sit a little bit on a diagonal. So that is perfect. Add the lining, flip up the loose pocket and bag, take the lining. Now be careful because it can be confusing which way to put it, so make sure it matches the fabric on the other one. Now take the raw edge and match it with the raw edge of the seam here. So I've matched it. I've actually folded it open and pinned it onto that seam. Also with the stitch showing, that's this 3/8 of an inch seam. And I'm going to top stitch on top of the seam that's already there to hold down the lining. There it is stitched onto that seam edge. Bring the pocket lining down. Bring this flap over top. You can see I didn't line it up really well, but oops, oh well, I'll trim it later. Now I'm going to flip this over, and I want to match the blue to the edge of the fabric of the other side. And then there's this extra little bubble of fabric, and you're just going to fold it over and make a little tiny pleat and stitch over it. And that makes a little bit of room for the space of the hand to fit inside. Now you can see I've got the blue pinned. I have the little pleat with the extra fabric, and it's ready to sew. Here I slide the flap out of the way and fold back to reveal the stitch line. And in the book, I believe this is 1/2 inch. As I'm coming to the other side, I want to make sure that the flap is down on that seam. I pull this open. I also want to make sure that I've tucked this out of the way without distorting the true diagonal of the edge. Then I will fold it open and continue stitching to the other side. Iron the pocket down. You can also iron it from the inside to make sure that this is laying flat. Once you've ironed it all flat and everything looks good, mark your stitch line very close to the edge and just do a back and forth all the way to the edge on both sides. And that's it. 5 inches across. There's the stitch lines, pockets inside. There's the bag. Now remember, the stiffer fabric is going to be facing the body, and when you put your hand inside, the softer fabric is going to be touching your knuckles.